Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. Each episode interviews experts like doctors, counselors, and life artists who give helpful tips on living a happier life. But most importantly, Bob interviews ordinary people who have suffered with a mental health issue, some on the brink of or attempted to take their own lives. Each one has recovered to lead a much happier life. Most of the guests have books or websites with more info that you can use for recovery. You can do it too. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
Today we talk with an amazing woman named Nicole Kerr. She wrote the book about her near-death experience, NDE, titled You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. She was a 19-year-old Air Force cadet in 1972 who took a ride home with a man she met at a party off base. The ride changed her life forever. Even if you don't believe in life after death, the spiritual message expressed in this episode is worth it. It's a little longer, but it goes by quick.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello, Nicole. How are you today?
Oh, hi, Bob. I am doing very well this morning. I'm delighted and really excited and actually really grateful to be on your show today.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I am looking forward to the time that we're going to be spending together and talking about this important subject.
Yeah, me too. Welcome to the show. Now, you have a very interesting story about a near-death experience. So I guess we could pick it up from there. You were 19 years old, and you were an Air Force Academy cadet, and you were coming home from a party, I believe. And then from there, I'll let you take it and tell the people the amazing story that you have.
Yeah. So first of all, let me tell people that I was one of the first females to actually go to one of the academies. Congress actually allowed women into the academies in 1976, was it? So the first class graduated 80 and mine was 86. So having women at the academies was still relatively new. And the only reason, Bob, that I was even at the academy was to please my father. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I don't know if anybody else out there is, but
Sure we have it.
that's an identity that if you take it too far, it will literally kill you trying to please someone else. And that's what I was doing. Was my dad was a graduate and he went into the Marine Corps and he wanted one of us 4 kids to follow in his steps. And so I took that on because I wanted to be daddy's girl. And I honestly didn't think that I was going to get in because it's such a laborious process. You have to get a congressional nomination, all this other stuff. But anyway, I did. And once, the congressman called me and told me, congratulations, I couldn't go back. It's like, oh my God, now I got to go. And so I knew the first 3 weeks of boot camp that this place was not for me, but I couldn't quit. I couldn't face the failure of going back home and facing my father, most of all, and his disappointment, and then disappointing everybody else that tried to help me get there. So I stuck it out, made it through the year, went back to for the second year, and that's when we had this squadron party. And needless to say, I got a ride back. I was one of the last to leave, and there was one other cadet who was a senior who had a car. And so I asked him if I could have a ride back, and he said, sure. So needless to say, we never made it back to the academy. And he wanted to stop and have a couple of beers, and then he wanted to stop and look at the beautiful sunset of the Rocky Mountains. And I was very naive. I had never been on a date, okay? I came from Jackson, Mississippi, a very conservative Bible Belt household. My dad was very controlling and very rule-oriented. So I started getting scared, like, oh my God, this guy had a whole other agenda. He wanted to get me drunk and he wanted to take advantage of me sexually. And I started freaking out. I was like, no, we got to get back. And that was the last thing I remembered until I woke up in the hospital in the ICU the next day. And my memory, Bob, came back 19 years later.
Wow.
Now, isn't that ironic? I die at 19 and my memory comes back 19 years later. And
you didn't remember a thing about the accident for 19 years?
Bright white lights. That's all I could remember was these bright white lights. And I asked the surgeon years later, I said, could these bright white lights, I keep remembering them. And that's the only thing. And I said, could they have been the operating room lights? And she said, absolutely not. You were totally unconscious. And she said, I think it's something else. And of course, when my memory came back and I remembered what happened, that is when Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, he says that this bright white light, this tunnel of bright white light that people talk about when they have a near-death experience, that is the most common element for all NDEs. So that's exactly what I was remembering. I just couldn't remember anything else until 19 years later when I was working at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I actually went to Starbucks, got my usual order, and I was on the way to work. And all of a sudden, I remembered exactly how I was sitting in the Corvette. It was a 1965 Corvette convertible. The top was down. We did not have seatbelts on.
Wow.
And needless to say, I had one leg up on the dashboard. The other leg was crossed over. So now it made sense why I cut off, almost completely amputated my left foot. I cut up all the insides of my thighs and vagina, sorry to be graphic, but the vagina area. I severed my right wrist. I broke my pelvis. So that whole part of my body from the waist down took a huge hit. But my spine and my brain were intact for the most part. I had a severe road burn on my face from skidding on the pavement. So I shaved off a couple of layers of skin there. And I was pronounced dead at the scene. There were some, this was right outside of Colorado Springs in a little town called Monument. And where the accident happened, there was a home there and the people heard it. So they came out and they took a look at me, couldn't get any vitals. They ran inside, got a blanket, of course, called 911 and covered me up. The first responders didn't get there until 10 to 13 minutes later. So I was underneath that blanket for that long. And when the EMT was working on me, I call him, he's one of my angels, John Hartling. And I still keep in touch with him and the doctor and my nurse. And I actually talk about that in one of the chapters in the book. I went back and interviewed them, and they're all amazing, amazing people in their own right. But the EMT started working me and could not get any vitals as well. So he did, the only thing he knew to do was this sternal knuckle press to elicit pain in the body. And when he did that, my right eye flinched and my pupil dilated. And at that moment, he knew there was some sign of life in me. He just hoped that he could keep me alive. And I don't know, Bob, if you've heard the phrase, the eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah.
At that point, my soul had left my body when I went through the windshield. And my angel, who I now know is my grandfather, picked me up and took me up to another space. Okay, so I didn't actually feel or hit the ground because I knew when I hit the ground I was going to die. So that angel, he took me up and my soul left my body when that happened. And I was laying down there in a ditch and I could see all of this happening. And when I go back to the EMT, when he got that sign from my eye, that was my soul coming right back in through my eye. And at that point, he was able to get a blood pressure on me of 60/0. Now, that is not a really good blood pressure, but at least you're alive, okay? And then he did his thing, just trying to save me, CPR all the way to the nearest community hospital. They couldn't even get me to a trauma hospital. And that night, I had an amazing surgeon, the first woman surgeon in Colorado Springs. She was my doctor, and she stayed with me the whole 4 months. And she went through the ups and downs along with my parents with me, but she is an amazing woman in her own right, a real maverick.
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to finally stabilize me. That's all they were trying to do, is just get me stable that night. And then I wound up in the hospital for 4 months, 7 weeks in ICU. They had to deal with all those injuries, but my body just, every time I'd start to get better, Bob, then something would happen and it would just like tank. And I had to have a colostomy because of the area I cut up. And so, as a 19-year-old waking up with a colostomy, I was like, I had never had sex before. And I was like, oh my God, I'm repulsed by this. I can't imagine, a man. So, I had to deal with a lot and a lot of pain. I was on a lot of painkillers. And after 7 weeks, when I finally got stable enough to move down to the pediatric ward, my dad made the call to just stop the pain medication. He didn't want me to become addicted. That was not a good thing. Okay. There was a lot of things that my parents did that were not in my best interest.
He didn't want you to lean down on the medicine. He just stopped it cold turkey.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I went through some hellish couple of days there, to be honest. And so, it was just, I think, looking back on it, the hardest part was my parents blamed me for the accident. They blamed me because my dad had told me, these are the rules: no smoking, no drinking, and no dating cadets. And I had actually had 2 beers at that bar we'd gone to. Okay, that's the most I'd had to drink in my life. I had 1 cigarette. I tried a cigarette. So I started what adolescence is all about, starting to rebel and starting to, have some fun in my life. And boy, did I get slapped down. And so, of course, my dad said, you deserved it. You were with this guy. And I said, Dad, I didn't even know him hardly. But it didn't matter. He blamed me. And the way I was raised Southern Baptist and Lutheran, because my dad is Baptist, my mom is Lutheran. And so disappointing my father meant I also disappointed my father in heaven. So my story has a lot of religion and the belief systems. I call it the vending machine concept of God, where I had grown up believing if I did the right thing, then if I punched the right button on the vending machine, I would get the right reward. Yeah. And I started not believing in that concept of God during boot camp because I was praying so hard for things not to happen, and it only got worse and worse and worse for me. And at one point, in the hospital, they said, Mr. and Ms. Kerr, your daughter is going to need, the doctor said this to them, she's going to need mental health. She's going to need a psychologist and a psychiatrist because she has been through major trauma. Mm-hmm. And my mother looked at the doctor and just said, well, Jesus and God are our psychiatrists and psychologists, and we're just fine. And, Bob, I wasn't fine. I needed help. And by not getting help, all they were interested in is they think if you physically are walking and functioning again on your own and you can do that, then you're okay. And my mental health turned into an eating disorder almost immediately when I had to go live with my sister because she was in Dallas and just finishing school. And this was a year later after all my rehab.
So you were in rehab for about a year? Wow. And I wanted to ask you don't remember anything about the accident for 20 years? You don't remember? What's the last thing that you remembered?
I remember getting in the car with him after we looked at the Rocky Mountains, and I was telling him we got to get back to the academy by 7:35, or we're gonna be in trouble, because I didn't want to start out the year in trouble. And he was like, "Oh, don't worry about it." And then when my memory came back, 19 years later, I remembered he made another sexual pass in the car, and I said no, and he got very angry with me and jerked the steering wheel, and the car fishtailed, hit a boulder. The car flew over, landed on its top, and we went airborne out of the car, and he survived. His alcohol level was double the limit. He was a general's son, so he was able, this is where rank has its privilege, and his dad made one call to the superintendent at the academy and said, "I don't care what happens to him, he's graduating." And sure enough, the state of Colorado charged him with vehicular assault and DUI, and he pleaded guilty. And in May, right before he graduated, they said, we're going to, you just have to do community service, whatever base you're going to be at. So he really did, in my opinion, just got a very light slap on the hand. And I do not talk to him. He never apologized to me. I found out later he was an alcoholic. And it just was really, I just wanted to ride back to the academy. And that's what I thought I was getting. And needless to say, when my memory came back, I remembered in detail what happened. I mean, and I talk about this in my book, You Are Deathless.
Did everything come back all at once? Was it just
2 days?
Okay.
Well, actually, the actual going over to the other side was 2 days.
Okay.
I went directly to see my chiropractor after I remembered me sitting in the car, and I didn't go to work that day. And he worked with me. It's called Repressed Memories. And he did some body work, and I started remembering with his guidance, here's what's happening. And then I had gotten to that point, and I'll read you just a little bit in the book.
Can you tell everybody the name of the book again?
Yeah, it's called You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. And it took me 13 years, Bob, to write this. Okay, it has healed me to write it, and I just did Audible on it. And boy, I had to go back to therapy. I'm doing the Audible, because when you speak your book or speak your truth, your story, and then you have to listen to your voice saying it back to you, boy, did that trigger some stuff that I already thought I had worked through. So
you were full of the PTSD pretty much, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the VA did not diagnose me with PTSD until 2 years ago. I was on 41 different medications for anxiety, depression, but never got the full PTSD diagnosis until 2 years ago.
When did the anxiety and depression start? Before you remembered, or right when you remembered?
I remembered when I woke up in the hospital, because I've lived in fear my whole life, fear of my father. Okay. And then I go into a military academy, and you only have three answers as a freshman. Yes, sir, no, sir, no excuse, sir. Okay. You don't get to explain yourself in the military. You don't get to tell them how you feel. That is not acceptable. So I lived with fear the entire first year, because I was not cut out to be in the military. I was not designed to kill people. I modeled in high school, okay? So I was in junior achievement. I did stuff that absolutely had nothing to do with the military. And now I'm in here learning how to shoot people with guns, and, going through boot camp and obstacle courses.
Yeah.
I was like Private Benjamin to a certain degree. I just could not, it was difficult for me.
I never considered even going into the Army and Navy, or any place that would put me in that situation where I pretty much have to do whatever they say, whenever they want me to do it. And that's scary to me. I never even wanted to get close to that.
Well, it was a natural progression for me, because I did everything my dad wanted me to do. So, it only was the next level is we'll go to a place where they tell you what to do. You don't have to think for yourself. You don't have, and that's why I couldn't quit, because I just couldn't deal with the shame and the embarrassment that I would feel quitting. Because when people did quit there, oh my gosh, the talk that went around about so-and-so quitting, it just, that's a really hard dynamic, fear of failure.
You went on disability immediately after you recovered, and that was it for you?
But yes, but only 40% they would give me. And it has taken me 38 years to get up to 100%. And and I finally and I will tell any veteran out there, they almost always deny the first time. And I have had migraines for 30 years. And migraines, if you've never had them, they totally debilitate you. You can't read, you can't watch TV, you can't do anything except sit in a dark room and just be in your head. And so, it's not like, oh, well, you can just, do something else while you got this. It takes over your life. And I tried to make the connection that migraines were related to my car crash, me hitting my head, even though they didn't have the diagnosis back then of TBI. I met the criteria, but they didn't write it in the actual report, and that's what the VA always goes back to, is the initial report. But finally, I found an advocate here in North Carolina who just sent it back. I went up for the third and final appeal of it with my migraines, because they're the most debilitating to me. And he was able to see where the doctor wrote, patient initially thought dead. And so he sent that back. That was the only thing. Some doctor read it and finally gave me the maximum forever. He said, if you initially come in dead, then you've had head trauma, and yes.
You had a concussion at least, and it probably moved a few things around there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it was, I had to really keep, and it wasn't more, I just wanted to be validated. It wasn't necessarily about the money, although that has helped me not to have to work. And now I can pursue my vocation, which is doing what I'm doing and helping people not fear death, because that was the mission I was told on the other side. When I went. It was to not be afraid of death. And we have a lot of people a lot of souls that are leaving the planet right now. And this is a time for people to start looking at death in a positive way. And that's why I talk about, the 10 common lessons from near-death experiencers. And the first one is, we do not die. I am here to tell you that the body, the physical body, yes, it decays, it dies, but once you die, your energy body, it opens up and your soul goes right straight up. So it's important for people to understand that if they're fearing death, they're not going to live. They're not going to really live life, because they're always going to be in fear. And fear is a very low vibration. And if that's running your decision making, you're not going to make good decisions for yourself.
Could you go more into the outer body experience itself? What was that like? Do you remember all that?
The actual experience, yeah, absolutely. So when my memory came back, what I remembered was here's part of the initial, and this is in my book on page 75. I'm spinning around insanely fast, like those tilt-a-whirl carnival rides, grabbing the side of the car door. I scream as my side of the car smashes head-on into something. What is it? I realize I can't stop anything, and my voice fades. I fly out of my seat through the windshield. Around me, glass is shattering like splatter paint. I feel pieces of it cutting into my thighs and legs. God, this hurts. And then something slices my left foot bad. I try to shield my face with my hand, my mouth wide open under it. Then I'm in the air for what feels like forever. When I finally hit the ground, I understand that I am going to die. My mind freezes. I scream, oh my God, help me. Then I have one final thought. I'm not going to make it. And I didn't make it. And so when I was in the air, I talk about in the book as Casper the Ghost, but now I've sensed in my meditations, my grandfather has come to me. He died at 58 years old. I got this message when I was 58 years old last August, and he said it was him in angel form when he was in his 30s that came, and he got me. He got my soul and took it to a space, and in that space was absolute bliss. And I will tell you that my experience, along with hundreds of thousands of other near-deathers, is that death is absolute beauty, light, and loving kindness on the other side. I heard other angels. Now, they weren't speaking English. I don't know how I understood them, but I did. Telepathy, whatever you want to call it. And they were communicating a message that I was to bring back as well, which was to ask your angels for help. They are not going to intervene in our lives because of something called free will, unless we ask them. We all have at least one guardian angel assigned to us. And some of us have more than that. And they want desperately to help us, but we have to ask. And most of us don't ask for help until we're at a real critical, like there's nowhere else to turn to, finally ask, for help from the other side. So if you're in a life and death situation like myself, I cried out, God help me, and they came. It was my grandfather who came and took my soul up. And so that's one thing that I really want to encourage listeners to do is start a conversation, start a relationship, start understanding that you are a spiritual being in a human body, and that when you pass, your spirit, your soul lives on. That's why I say we do not die. Our soul has this long trajectory, and that lives on. And it is beautiful. It really is beautiful. You don't experience, on the other side of death, for me, I felt like God was all around me. God was an energy, and God was in me. God was me. I was God. God was presence and fullness and oneness. But most of all, Bob, God was love, pure, non-judgmental love. And when you're in that state, it was not that I suddenly had been forgiven for my mistakes. It's just they no longer existed. Nothing I had done on earth was being weighed or measured. It was just simply the way my story played out in this realm. And I had been searching for something externally, as a God externally. And I kept running up against unconditional love my whole life. And that just didn't exist. And another one of the lessons is love is all that matters and is the source of all that exists. Well, when you think of source, meaning God, whatever you want to call it, that is love. So what I got was really clear is this duality that most of us were taught, that God is love and positive and protective and all these things. But he's also, if you don't follow the rules, judgmental and critical, and the wrath of God is going to come on you, and you're going to go to a place called hell, and you're going to be eternally separated from your family. That is not truth.
Yeah. That's what my kids believe. There are, my oldest son is he was a youth pastor. Now he's a full pastor at a born-again Christian church. And he definitely believes that I'm going to go to hell because I don't accept Jesus as my personal savior. So this really hit home to me because one of my biggest fears is death. I wish I had more faith, I guess, but being a scientific, I'm an analytical person, I just can't believe it 100%. I'll say to myself, well, the world doesn't make sense if there's a God. And then on the other side, the world doesn't make sense if there's not a God. So it's crazy. I mean,
yeah, I hear you, Bob, and I hear your rationale with that. And, I used to work at the CDC and everything was scientific there, right? But my specialty was nutrition, but we got a lot wrong. Even when we thought we knew what we were doing, it turned out that wasn't the truth, And so what I'm trying to tell people is that death is, when I reflect on it, and what I'm trying to say is, your essence, your soul, your light, your beauty, it never dies. And that is what goes on. And that is why people can communicate with spirits on the other side. We all have that intuition to do that. Angels, how do these, when I look at the lights the other night from pictures of people that had the Northern Lights coming in at different places, the colors, and that's what I remembered on the other side. The colors were absolutely unbelievable. And the feeling of being like in a chrysalis of love and just peace and bliss. There's not even really words for it. And everyone and everything is connected. We are all connected. Mother Earth, nature, doggies, cats, everybody is connected. And, we are more than our physical body and brains. And it's really taken me 40 years here. I'm on this, spiritually transformed person, and I'm still on the journey because I'm still trying to understand the concept of God. And I have worked with a little 6-year-old girl, and she, to me, has given me the best description of God because she was so scared. She was coming from a fundamentalist church. She was adopted, and she thought she was going to be separated from this family that adopted her because she did something, quote, bad. And I asked her how she sees God, and she eagerly told me, God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons and all different colors, no head, and can talk. And I thought, I love that. Clearly, this little girl is still having a direct experience with God with no filters from other people involved, because I think so many, including me, got messed up with God was to have a relationship with God or Jesus. Well, if they're supposed to give you some evidence back that they're hearing you or getting you, and when you don't get that, it just creates doubt, and then you just give up, and then you just start doing things on your own and thinking, I don't need that. It didn't work for me. That just does, it doesn't apply to me anymore. It's taken me a long time to really let go of the imprints that I got as a young child about the fear element that the church puts into people about God and heaven and hell and all of that. And I'm just here to tell you that there is no hell. People live in hell on earth. It's living a really just barely surviving life. That creates hell, and all of the inequality that goes on here, and the mass murders, all of that is hellish to live in because you're living in fear. I mean, we are at a heightened phase of fear in this country, and especially the U.S. with all the mass murders that go on. And, I'm just, it's going to change. It's going to take some time, but it needs to be where we respect everyone. We are all equal. We are all connected. And, we, including Mother Nature and how we treat the earth and the planet, and how we treat animals, all sentient beings, and the COVID-19, me being a dietitian, I was looking at, all these SARS viruses are coming from animal to human transmission. So look at the way we're treating the animals. Well, one of the hardest hit industries is the poultry and the meat industry because of the way they're processing the animals. And a lot of the workers there got COVID, but they didn't change and they kept working through it all. And it's like, when are we going to listen to these messages that we've got to change the way that we are treating each other, the planet, and everybody, and, and sentient beings?
Yeah. I think there's a mental health crisis. It's a pandemic at exponential speed, and there's not enough people saying things that will help people from shooting other people. One thing I live my life by, and one equation I always think of, is that God equals love equals truth. I believe personally, the closer you get to truth, the closer you get to God. And if you look at TV now, it's all, it's not anything to do with the truth. It's a spin. They spin everything. And I believe that if we got closer to the truth,
right,
if everybody was more truthful about everything, it would create a great paradise on earth.
Yeah, well, that's called becoming conscious, Bob. And I think so much of our society is just running around unconscious, and I think this is what the pandemic was. It kind of sets the stage for that, where, you had to stay home, you had to try to kind of hibernate and go within. And it was an opportunity to really start conceptualizing. I say, what is your concept of God? Because your beliefs about God shape your relationship with death. And I start there with people. And I have a fear checklist in my book about what you're fearful of. But don't be afraid of death was my call to action when my memory returned. And I was like, how in the world am I supposed to get this message out? But to do that, I'm starting with my book, which took, another 2 decades to do it, because I've been working on myself this whole time, trying to understand the emotional component of health, because in our society, we are very emotionally illiterate. I would say most of us grow up with the emotions bad, sad, mad, or glad. You get taught to, especially in the South, push your emotions down. You don't get angry at your mother. You don't hurt your mother, but I can't say enough about emotional healing. And we all have emotions we push down or stuff down during our lives. And when we feel, we heal, right? That's part of that journey. And the world, the word heal, if you think about it, has a common origin with the words whole and holy, pointing to the relationship between the body and the spirit. So when you look at the wellness wheel, physical is one part, mental is another chunk, emotional, the emotions are another, and then spiritual. And in wellness programming, which I've been in my whole career, we only talked about eat this, get your 30 minutes of physical activity, get your sleep. And we have missed the other components greatly because we focused on the physical. Well, the truth is we're only here in a physical body for a short period of time, and we need to start spending more time on the spiritual relationship and what that looks like for you and what do you really believe, because I have really had to overhaul that whole ingrained, imprinted, brainwashed concept of the wrath of God is going to get me. And my parents still believe that, I don't speak to them anymore because they just can't believe that what happened to me happened to me. And I'm like, you think I would make any of this up, and go through all the pain and suffering? And there's another part of healing that a lot of people don't know about, and that's called soul loss. And I don't know if you're familiar with that as well.
No, I never heard that term. What's that?
Okay, well, we all have a soul, okay? And when the crash happened, parts of my soul left me. And how do I know that? Well, there's 3 symptoms I didn't want to come back here. And I said that on the other side. I don't want, when he said, my angel grandfather said, you're going to go back and you need to tell people not to be afraid of death. I was like, oh no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to get in that body because, first of all, the body is going to be painful and a lot of suffering because there's a lot of injuries. Second of all, I'm going to go back to a state of infancy where I'm going to be dependent on my mother and father again because I can't even walk or go to the bathroom by myself. And thirdly, I didn't trust the God that they believed in, that concept of the God that they raised us with and still believed in. And I didn't want to go back and be told I got to go back to, this church again and sit there and listen to this message that I don't, at some level, did not believe in.
You don't believe in it, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have that problem with my children. They're all incorporated into that theme. They figured it all out at 30. They won't know a lot more than I do, they say. And what I look at that and I say, wait a minute, you're not really becoming more spiritual. You're just stopping the learning process. Because you always have to learn. The more you know, the more you know that you don't know enough.
Absolutely.
And my kids are like, no, that's it, Dad. We figured it all out. Why are you so behind? And it's a struggle. But I just really can't emphasize enough that being true to yourself and others is a godlike act. That we have to stop spinning, lying, justifying things.
Absolutely. Yes. And there is something called spiritual amnesia, and there's something called spiritual bypassing and spiritual abuse. And that goes in there with mental abuse as well. But those are terms that have not really been talked about, and we can spend a whole show on those alone. But I wanted to just go back to the soul loss, if there's anybody there. It's a low-level, consistent feeling that something is missing. I have had a low-grade depression. It's part of my PTSD since this happened. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to note that many of your compulsive behaviors and addictions fall into this statement. And now for me, I can clearly see the link between my compulsive eating, binge eating, but it wasn't called binge eating back in the 80s. And that lasted for 20 years until I got married. And my feeling of emptiness, it was just because I had no connection with the spiritual realm, God, anything. I was just trying to go forward on my own. And lastly, I cannot get over it, this trauma. I just can't get over it. And for me, I just felt stuck with my chronic health conditions and hypervigilance, above all, about keeping myself safe, the need to control my environment and myself so that something like this would never happen again. And my soul left me as a means of self-protection. And I really wish I knew earlier that although this was unavoidable or necessary at the time of my trauma, neglecting that hurt, fragmented part of my soul and going on with life with it fragmented has led to other problems such as the depression.
And everyone is fragmented. Everyone has an insecurity that's deep down. I call it the first layer. That's pure fear. That's pure fear. And above that layer, you have different acts that they do to make themselves feel better, like physical or making money or sex or anything. You have this layer that they try to cover up the first layer with, and then on top of that we have addiction, which is another form of covering up.
Right.
I often say that people have to get outside themselves if they want to heal. I mean, I know a lot of people with mental health issues, and a lot of them cannot get outside themselves. They just talk about themselves all the time.
Yeah.
And if they could just get outside and see the whole picture, it'd be a lot better, I think. But I don't have all the answers. I'm looking for answers.
Well, but that's just it. Nobody does. And anybody who claims they do, that's a red flag. So I want to repeat that. Anybody that claims they have all the answers, put up a red flag, because I'm going to tell you, even I don't even have all the answers. I'm still searching. And that's what we're all here on, is a healing journey. We came in here to, in my opinion, as a journey to love. And what happens to us happens as our soul's way of stretching us to expand that ability to love. And I think it's the most important reason why. And, Jack Canfield, he talked to a woman who had an NDE experience, and he just said, I have two questions. What wisdom have you gained in this lifetime? And how have you expanded your capacity to love? And I think that's a very wonderful, some wonderful questions to reflect on. And as you move forward in your life, to think about that. How have you expanded your capacity to love? Love Mother Earth, love dogs, love each other, love yourself most of all, and not judge yourself, because I will tell you, we are not judged on the other side. That's a whole nother belief system that is wrong. There's nobody at the gates of heaven standing there with a tablet judging everything. You have a life review, which is completely different from being judged. And that's why when you're free of knowing that you're going to be judged, oh my gosh, it's like, how awesome is that?
I have a show coming up called Lies. And what I'm trying to say is that from the minute you're born, you're lied to, pretty much. I mean, not just Santa Claus and Easter Bunny, but everything's a lie. The fact that life is forever. When you're 30, you go, oh, I'm going to age, and that's so far away. But then all of a sudden, you're 65, and it's not so far away. So people have to realize that and try to begin a spiritual journey, because I think mental health problems, in a way, is people searching for something, searching for a more spiritual world.
Yes, I want to say amen to that. I don't usually say that word a lot, but you are exactly right. I completely believe that we have to take responsibility ourselves for our spirituality and our journey there.
But it's too painful. It's too painful for most people. They can't go to the dark side and face it. They can't face, the darkness beyond their cover-ups. They can't go into that last layer and say, no, I'm not scared of you anymore. You can come and you can make me feel bad. That's fine. You have to sit down with me. Sit over there. Take command of these demons, I call them. You sit over there and you behave yourself, because I'm not falling for it anymore. I'm not listening to what you say. I'm not doing what you want me to do. I am going to live a spiritual, truthful life in spite of you. And I don't know if you could ever fully release the demons, but God, I think we ought to try. I think everybody ought to try.
Oh, Bob, that is so well said, because that has been the hardest part of my whole journey. It wasn't dying on the operating. I had 2 more code blues. Look, I was really trying to get out of here, okay, because I knew what I was coming up against with my family. And I had a code blue on the operating table, and then my heart started again, and then my lungs filled up with fluid, and I almost drowned. So I had some angels working overtime to just keep me alive, because they knew this talk that we're having right now needs to be talked about. And my parents are very toxic for me, because they think they are right, and they have God comes before everything. And if you don't fit in their mold of that, they have no interest in you. And so they're narcissistic, and it's like my whole idea of my family blew up when they wouldn't listen to me. And I look back my whole life, and it's like, but they never did anyway. Why would my dad want to send me into a place that he knew was abusive? not only
Of course.
mentally, physically, emotionally, but sexually when women got in there. I was dealing with that. Why would any father do that? And I was mortified that I kept myself in it, but I didn't know what else to do. I just kept doing the next thing. You're only 19, so it has been a journey, but I do believe that setting your boundaries and just saying no,
Yeah, my kids think I'm toxic because I don't believe in this story about Jesus and everything, and I challenge authority, and I challenge them. They don't want to be challenged.
Yeah, well,
I say
right.
to them, "You could have done this for me, and you didn't." And right off the bat, they get defensive and they start justifying it, saying, "Oh, Dad's crazy. He's toxic to us. We don't want to listen to this nonsense." And it puts such a big rift between us
Yeah.
because I can't reach your souls.
No, I understand. And my 3 siblings, it was interesting when my book came out. My mother and father have not read it, to my knowledge. My one brother who lives over in Australia with them has not read it. My sister said, well written, okay, because she is very much into Jesus. And my other brother, he was 8th grade when my accident happened, and he knew none of that. So he took each chapter and was in tears, saying, I never knew that every day it was life or death for you, Nicole. And if you would have died and, stayed dead, I don't think I could ever forgive Mom and Dad for them not telling me how bad it was and coming to see you. In 4 months, they never allowed him to come see me. So, let go of it. And I have to just keep pursuing what I know is my truth and connect with people that are in my tribe that are working toward this same. And it's called being a light worker. And that's what I'm here to do, is to, break open and to challenge these beliefs that have been generational. And for Jesus, what I can say about him is Jesus to me is a way shower. That's how I see Jesus.
What would Jesus do?
God,
That's
yes.
what I say to my kids all the time. What would Jesus do? And they're like, well, they justify it.
Well, and the first thing I say is, Jesus said, judge not lest you be judged. Mm-hmm. And look at how much judgment is going on here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I said, so you pick and choose the pieces that you want with Jesus, but Jesus, you don't need Jesus to get to God. And
but they say, but don't say that to them, because Jesus is the only way to God.
Well, I will tell you, God is within all of us. We all have a spark of God, and that is, you don't have to go. You go within. That's why all the answers are within.
I feel God, but he's my personal God. I don't want to share him. I'm sorry. It's a personal thing for me.
And you don't have to. And I don't, I just think that we all have to come into our own, and it's only through our own experience that we come into what our concept of God is. And what I know is what my concept of God is not. And what I read earlier about the little girl with the balloons and the blue spirit, that to me is more God, because it's energy, it's love, it's not personal. There's not a form, because there's nowhere that God is not. God is everywhere. And that's why, this universe, oh my God, there's more than this in the life, And so it gets exciting when you start looking at it like that.
They're trying to change me, and I'm trying to change them, and neither of us are going to do that. And I might have to accept that this is as far as they go in this lifetime. That they don't go any further.
Well, and that's and I got to the point with my family now. My parents, that's all they talk about, so I can't even talk about that. So I choose not to. And my dad too. He's just said, I don't want to have anything else to do with you. And if you write your book and you get God wrong, you better watch out. And I'm like, okay, there I go again. More fear. That's all you've ever done, is put more fear in you.
We talk about baseball and other things, but never spirituality. We don't talk about it, because they don't even believe in ADHD. They think I'm just narcissistic and a jerk and rude and interrupt. As you know, I interrupt you a few times, but I have a hard time finding a place where I can talk, but especially in a group. ADHDers are always being chastised. I don't know if you listen to any of the other podcasts that I did, but I think that ADHD is a super big problem because the people that aren't intelligent enough to compensate for it, I was able to compensate. In misery, but I was able to compensate. And some people can't. And what's happening to these people that can't? They're on the street or they're in jail. So I think you can start there and say everybody needs to accept each other. You can't say, oh, he learns a different way. Forget it. We don't. He's a jerk. We don't want anything to do with him because he learns different. He has a different brain than us, so we don't care. We'll teach him the old way that we know, and it's just not fair. It creates a real discrimination, and discrimination is one of the worst things in the world.
And that's going back to the old ways of missionaries. I know what's right for you. And they were doing fine without, I living in Hawaii for almost 20 years. I can tell you that the Native Americans really do, for the most part, resent haoles, which is what white people are called. And if you look at the term haole, it's without breath. Okay. And it's like, you took away our breath, our life force energy by coming here and telling us we had to believe this way, and I learned a lot while I was out there. And one thing that I am sure of is, when I went to the ocean almost daily and looked at the beauty of that, I just felt when feeling the sand and the sun, and that's just such the freedom and the connection to spirit, and just knowing there is so much more to life.
It's light years ahead of anything else. I mean, money and all that stuff. If you are desperate, it's like eating. If you don't have food, you got a problem. But if you have enough to keep you going, and you're able to do spiritual things that you enjoy, then that's enough. Forget about the money. What's going to happen when you die and you're dead and you're going to be, oh, give me more money, please? No, you're going to be saying, I want my children. Where are my children? I want to love them. I want them to be next to me. And this is our problem, I think. This is what people come to, and they're like, I have a one-track mind. I want money and I want power and all the things that are useless. In a short period of time.
Yes.
In a short period of time, you're going to be going away. And what are you going to have? Are you going to have that spirituality? You're going to have that love? You're going to have that unconditional love? Probably not. Because no one's teaching it. No one is out there really teaching it that much. We don't have a revolution, which we should be having right now, because if you watch the 6 o'clock news, you're going to be depressed.
Well, we're starting one. We're starting one. So, I think getting my book out there, get people to think about it, to start becoming conscious. Because when you become aware and you start looking at, oh my goodness, I could die tomorrow. That's the thing we forget, is we are not guaranteed tomorrow.
Exactly.
And I certainly didn't think I was going to die at 19. No. And it doesn't matter, these little kids that were just killed in Nashville and the other 3 people, they never got to go home that day and, brush their teeth again or any of that. It just is like, boom.
And who does those acts? Those acts are performed by people that have been tortured their entire life, and they have no way out, and they are going to punish somebody when they go out because they've been tortured. Now, some of these people are just born that way, I guess, but a large amount of these people, they may have a learning disability, for instance, like ADHD, dyslexia, and everybody makes fun of them all the time. People made fun of me my entire life. I've been a clown my entire life. And I could see how people could react to that. Nobody's helping. There's no mental health for these people. They have no hope, and they wind up taking it out. The devil comes and takes them away.
Yes, and I can understand when I felt like my parents were not going to love me ever again. They were going to be disappointed in me and blaming me. And then I will tell you, my physical body, to know the body I was going to have to live in for the remainder of my life with its challenges. Because when you're compromised with your health, you all of a sudden, I used to wake up and take my health for granted. I could do anything I wanted. And now I don't know, if I can follow through with the commitment I made, because I don't know every day what my health situation is going to be. And the third thing is, I, at that point, didn't believe in the only concept of God I was ever taught. I just knew wasn't working for me. So why live? I can understand why people would just want to check out, because, what is there worth living for? I've lost my family's trust. I've lost my body. And
they're
yes,
angry.
You are angry.
I'm angry. Yes. But I'm a passive person. I wouldn't hurt a fly. But I'm angry. I'm angry that I had to go through this. I had to be tortured for 50 years before I discovered by some fluke that everybody has this, there's 10% of the, maybe even more, have some kind of learning disability or artistic or whatever the heck it is. But I'm functional. I can do a lot. But why is it that I have to be tortured?
I think it's actually more than that, to be honest with you. I think there was a lot of kids that never got diagnosed early on in our generation, because I'm only a couple of years older than you. And I think, it's a long journey. And I think people forget that healing is not linear. Just because you take a pill doesn't mean it's going to cure something. You have to keep getting to the root, which is the root issue. And I think it goes back to taking, the lack of responsibility for your own spirituality and really going, wait a minute, do I believe this just because my family does and I want to stay in good stead with my family? Or, I'm just going along and I go to Easter service and Christmas service, but I really don't believe in it, So I think when you start setting your boundaries and you take responsibility, you start realizing you get your voice back, and that in the end, you came here with a contract to learn something, and it's how to love yourself. But at the same time, we're also light workers and getting the light out of, we are all energy. At the end of the day, we're all energy.
If I had this kind of help in a podcast that I could have listened to when I was 11 years old, I would have avoided all that suffering. I mean, it's tremendous OCD suffering on a daily basis, and also abuse. And I started this podcast to make sure that these 10-year-old kids are not going to enter hell, that they're going to be able to heal themselves because you can. If I didn't think you could, I would say that. I would say, no, kill yourself. It's terrible. You're never going to cure yourself. The world is horrible. I don't say that because it's not true. I look for the truth. No. You can find peace in this life if you look for the truth and you help yourself and you take care of yourself. How many people take care of themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, people say, I'm depressed, and then they eat 10 pounds of sugar. So you either want it or you don't want it,
Yeah, and I think transformation is hard. It is hard work. I've spent I never had children, and now I've got two adopted Pekingese, and I never had dogs, and I'm just like, oh my God, that's a whole different level of expanding your heart to open up to a doggy, because they are just unconditional. They are so excited to see us every time we come down the stairs, and I think that's where you find joy, because I didn't think I'd ever feel joy again. And I'm learning how, and I've done so much work on myself, in terms of clearing things and getting in alignment. And I want to say on my book, I have a credential called BTDT, and it stands for, you ready for this, Bob?
I'm ready.
Been there, done that. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, out of all the alphabet letters after my name, that to me is the most important, because I have been on the other side. I've seen it, and I don't want other people to have to die to get the lesson that I did. And there is help available from the angelic realm, the spiritual realm. We have to ask for it. We don't need to fear death. It is absolutely beautiful. And yes, we're human. So when people do pass, we still have to deal with the emotions of suffering and grief and pain and loss. And, you know, carefully and compassionately hold and heal them, but, or be with them. But when you look at the cosmic context, it's benevolent and extraordinary. And knowing that true context enables us to live a happier life and to prepare for our own graceful passing and to support others as they approach their own transition. And with these words in mind, I am here to help change that worldview and vibration and cultural misunderstanding around death. And to do this, we have to start addressing the difficulties getting there, which are our fears.
We need to reach people now because there's a tremendous amount of teenage suicide going on. There's an epidemic of cutting. I don't know if you've ever seen a cut person. It's not a pretty sight.
No, unfortunately I have. I worked with a lot of eating disorders.
And these people are on the brink where they're going to say, you know, fuck it. I don't care. I'm going to kill myself. Wrong. Help yourself, especially if you're young and healthy. Don't make everybody around you suffer. And you got life. You got more life to live. You have to understand that you can be cured. It can be. I think the other big crisis, you know, with mental health is all the fentanyl laced drugs that people are getting, and they don't even know they're laced. And it's not only drugs; it's now cannabis as well. So you know, people don't even want to be police officers because if they come across somebody that's got fentanyl and they get it on them, they could die from that as well as a gunshot wound. So you know, I think there's a lot in our country that's causing a lot of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and trauma. And we have got to start doing things differently. And the first thing is to cut out listening to stuff that's fear-based. Exactly. I mean, everything is fear-based, but yeah, let's not listen to 24 hours of bad news. Gee, maybe that's why you're depressed, because you listen to 24 hours. I gave up news, period.
I did too.
It's all wrong. It's all slanted.
Well,
it's like a soap opera. It's ridiculous. And all they care about is death and dying and bad people. And that guy was crazy, so he shot somebody because he was crazy. Yeah, that's a big excuse. Crazy. Everybody pulls that crazy card out and says, this guy was crazy. But what was he before he was crazy? Was he a good person that went bad? You know?
Well, yeah, and that's the part people don't want to get into is there are red flags along the way and people just look the other way. And we have to help our fellow souls out there. You know, this is time to start being of service instead of being narcissistic.
Yeah. And this is just a tip of the iceberg. This is a very good conversation, but it does have to end. I thank you so much for coming on the show and expressing these ideas and giving people hope, because I know I feel hopeless sometimes that, okay, I'm just going to die and there's nothing. And,
oh no, Bob, there's, you're going to see it when you start transitioning. Your loved ones and others are they start showing up for you before you pass. And it's just, you know, we just have to get our head around that these bodies that we spend so much time worrying about, treat them, you know, as healthy as you can, but really work on the spirituality part of our life now. You know, this is what this is about.
Everybody has to try to help themselves. And most people don't know how. They have no effing idea. Well, I'll make more money. I'll feel better. I'll get a romance. That'll do it. Once I get a romance.
Yeah, there's nothing outside of yourself that's going to fix you. You have to do the work, and it finally comes. It shows up last in the physical body, but you start the work at the spiritual, emotional level. You do all of that work, and then finally your body, once you get those pieces in alignment, your body starts turning around and healing.
Right.
That's why
exactly.
it's not linear.
Yeah, I have all sorts of numbness in my legs and things like that, and it's from fighting for years, fighting this problem, and I've gotten to a point where I can be happy again. Not all the time, definitely not all the time, but I can be happy. And I'll tell you, I didn't have many happy moments since 1970, really. I mean, but now I'm happy.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I finally am too. I am too. I'm not worried. I used to worry so much about, safety and needing to control things. And now I'm just free from that because I know if it's my time, I'm going to go. And I'm okay with death now. And I just know that I'm here for a reason. And I'm just at the infancy of that. And I'm just grateful that you put me on your show today. And I hope I've helped someone. You can check out my website at Nicole Kerr, KERR.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I really suggest you get my book. It's only $9.99. I mean, what's that? The cost of a Frappuccino and a bagel. And there are pictures in it as well. And then it's going to be coming out in Audible, hopefully next week. And so if you're one of the 30% of the market that prefer to listen to things, you can listen, and I'll be posting the images that are in the book on my website so that you can go along with the images, because there's nothing that I could say that would explain the Corvette the day after the crash. You just have to see it to see it's unsurvivable.
Yeah, you have a picture. Oh, man. It's an amazing story. And again, I thank you. And I hope the rest of your life is beautiful. And take care.
Same to you, Bob. Okay. Blessings. Okay.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Aloha.
Bye.